All right, we're back. It is COMP1004 in the winter 2017 semester at Georgian, and we are week 5, part 1 of our broadcast. And we're continuing to talk about multi-form applications today and additional tool sets. You need a radio button. Thanks for your assignment number 1, which we're going to go over. And I want to talk about assignment 2. Assignment 2. Let's take a look at that, which is important. I posted some more PowerPoints, but again, they're just support for you at this point. They shouldn't really be breaking ground in any way. It shouldn't be like you haven't learned some of the syntax of doing different, statements, especially when it comes to conditional statements. Yeah, even arrays, they should be somewhat familiar to you, even though they're slightly different syntax, which we'll talk about again today. So that's, again, week 5, right? So, so again, the couple of PowerPoints that are up there, just to show you what they are, is how to use arrays and collections, which we kind of covered last week because the PowerPoints are messed up. And then how to work with dates and strings, which is kind of something that I want to talk about today because we need to talk about them, right? But the other thing that I want to talk about is assignment number 2. And if you look at assignment 2's details one more time really quickly, just to make sure that we're all clear, because I know people didn't ask enough questions last week. It just happens, right? And I'll bring up assignment 2, and you'll be like, oh, yeah, it's assignment 2. You've showed this already, Tom. That's great. But remember what it needs. We need to talk about this menu, how to do a menu, right? We need to talk about that today. We need to talk about a couple of other things, like the things that I've asked you to do, right? Like when I gave you the example UI down here, and this is just an example, minimum requirements, I would say, right? My expectations is that you'll at least do this, right? And, have an opportunity for some bonus, right? To make your, your application look a little nicer. So notice that there are some check boxes and radio buttons, and we need to know how to do both and what the events are that would trigger both kinds of controls, right? This stuff you've already done. You've already done calculations, right? By now you should know how to do some simple validation, even just by intuition, right? Because you would have learned that in other courses. And but this stuff and this stuff up here we have to talk about. We've already talked about how to make an exit button. We know how to do that, and we've also talked about early on how to share event handlers, right? Because we just have to just choose the same event handler, right? So those are the things we have to talk about. I'm going to keep that up. I'm also going to go into our little folder here because we do have a folder that we've been using from last week, not this one. Maybe if I go in the right folder, it will be good. And not that one. How about we go into Visual Studio and open that up? That might be the better way, Tom. Which is this one, right? 1004 lesson 4 was what we did last week, and we're going to make a template. Remember, I told you need to do a template for your exam. It's 100% going to be required, right? So please don't forget to know how to do this. This is important knowledge, right? Even though it's a little bit of Visual Studio stuff you need to know, it's still required. So it's I got my file, everything's working. I put everything up on GitHub, and I want to close off these things just to be clear, right? You don't have to, but we're going to close off these things, including the splash screen and everything else. And we have a little calculator that we haven't finished. And what I want to do is I want to close my solution after I export. So I'm going to go to Export Template, and I'm going to choose Project Template, click Next, right? And we're going to make it so we'll leave it at lesson 4 for now, if we can. And notice I could put icons and preview images like I said before, but for now, all we care about is clicking Finish. So we don't care why it does what it does right now. All I want you to do is just get used to the workflow of creating a template. And we've done that from almost the very beginning. Just so that no one should be kind of shy on how to do this kind of stuff. Once the screen comes up, my File Explorer screen, you can assume that the template's been created. And what it will look like for you is much different than this because it'll show you the actual template name .zip, whatever the template name is. We're going to go File, Close Solution, right? And then we're going to File, New Project, and we're going to choose that other template type that we just made. So I'm going to go to not C++, but C#. You see where my brain is. And I'm going to scroll down all the way until we get to that template type, right, where it's COMP1004, right? And winter 2017, lesson 4. You can see lesson 3 from last week. That's the template we made. Here's lesson 4. And I'm going to change lesson 4 to lesson 5. Not a lot of stuff. I'm also going to choose Create New Git Repository because I want to put it up on GitHub for you. and press OK. This is going to do all the heavy lifting for us. It's going to create our template. And it's going to use our template and create our new project. And just to be sure how this works, to make sure that we test it, I'm just going to run this in by pressing start. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to get the 1, 2, 3, right? After the welcome to calculator comes on, we're going to get our calculator, right? That's what we should get. And we close this off. Notice it asks me are you sure we did this last week? And then we press OK, and it closes off everything. Now we're ready to go to GitHub. I haven't changed anything. If I click on changes, you can see that there's nothing changed. But I do want to publish my repository on Git. I'm going to go to sync. And what sync will do is, because if I have my publish to GitHub, this little GitHub extension for Visual Studio, I'll be able to click on publish to GitHub. And then it'll ask me where. I'm going to pick my organization, right? So Georgian. And then from there, if I've done everything correctly, and if it says COMP1004, winter 2017 lesson 5, notice this should match what this is down here, unless Visual Studio screws up, and sometimes it will. And then press publish. And if we're good citizens of the universe, it'll work. It'll come up. And to test that, of course, we want to go to GitHub, right? Want to github.com, look at Georgian College and see if our repository is there. Yay. So please use this repository if you're following along with me for this video, because we're going to morph and do more things from here. Okay, so we can close this off for now. I'm going to go back to my Solution Explorer, and like I said, I'm missing a couple things here. What about if I made a calculate button and some kind of form? So let me go and pull up my little form for my calculator form. Here's my calculator form. It's pretty boring at this point, right? But I want to do a couple things here. Imagine that I don't want to allow anybody to, click the X in any ways, or maybe I do, but I also want a little area here. So my calculator is pretty big, this area here. And what I want to do is I want to make an area, maybe I want to expand the calculator a little bit. Remember I told you about making it a little bit larger. Down. What would be the fast way or the good way to move all of this stuff down to give myself a little bit of space for my menu? Because I need some space, right? Anybody have an idea? Well, we know that this part here, right, is my control that can move all this stuff, right? Remember, I put this all inside of a grid of some kind, right? Table view equivalent. So I'm going to a table layout. So I'm going to kind of pull this down so it kind of goes down. That's the first thing I want to do. And now what we can probably do is use our arrow keys just to nudge. That's what we call it in the graphics world. Whenever we move things around with arrow keys, pixel by pixel, we're nudging it one direction or the other, right? And the same thing with this. I'm probably going to nudge this so it's just, sitting on top of the other one, just to modify our layout a touch here. And then move this calculator logo down to give us enough room, hopefully, to create that menu. Okay, it looks to me we might have enough room for our menu. We don't have a lot of room for menu items here, but it's going to look like this. I want you to think of this. Whenever we make a menu, we want to follow, because we're doing things for Windows, okay? If we're doing things for the Mac or some other, operating system, it would be different. But for Windows, you should follow the following best practice. Edit, view, help, right? That makes sense, right? If you made your menus appear in some random order, right? Guess what? People hate that, right? Because you don't know where everything is. If you make Control-C and Control-V do something different for you in that window, that's a bad thing, right? You should maintain best practices and conventions. And actually, a lot of the platforms we see today in today's market is convention over configuration, right? When you use convention, we're going to leverage the stuff that's already been there, as opposed to reinventing the wheel. Why would I reinvent the way I'm going to do my menus when Microsoft does it in everything that they do? So we want to make it so that it makes sense. Now we may not include all of these because some of the ones in here, for example, project, build, debug, team, all this is application specific. But whenever we build a menu, we know we're going to have file. We're probably going to have edit, view, window, and help. Those probably are the ones we're going to have for sure. Now in our application, if we don't need all that, we don't have to have it. Anything to do with files opening and closing, though, chances are it's going to be in the file menu. Okay? How do I get the menu? So on the left, I'm going to go to my toolbox. I'm going to kind of clip it on here. And again, if you don't know where to find the menu, you can always search for menu. There's my menu strip is what it's called, right? And I'm going to drag and drop my menu strip right onto the form itself. Now notice it gives me a little bit of leeway here, and that's why I've kind of dragged it down the way I want, or the way I have. And there's a couple of options I want you to take note of. This little smart arrow, okay? If you click on it, you can see that I have a render mode, my manager render, right? We'll leave that the way it is. My dock, top. My grip style, hidden, right? Why would I want my grip style hidden? Because in this case, if I put my grip style visible, that means I can grip it and move my menu around maybe, right? I don't want that kind of menu for my application, so I won't include that. Notice that those are the options, right? Visible or hidden. For dock, you can choose almost like a layout of where you want your stuff, right? So the right or the left, somewhere in the middle, you know. And then for manager render, let's leave that for whatever it is. Let's leave it as alone for now. We'll talk about that another time. It also says embed in tool strip container, which we don't want for now. Insert standard items. What the hell is this? Click, right? You know what? To me, guys, it's always easier to destroy than to build, right? So I always look at it like this. I can build something quickly, rapid application development. Remember the title of our course? And then take it away. That's much easier than me to have to go in there and make things myself. That takes way more time and effort. Okay, so let's think about this clearly now. Do I need an edit of any kind? Look what the common things are. There's undo, redo, cut, copy, paste, select all. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not, I think is the answer here. Tools. Options. Maybe I have some kind of customization or option screens I want in there. Maybe, maybe not. Help. Definitely don't need contents or index or search, but maybe an about, right? So that I need some of those. File, save as, print preview. Don't need any of that stuff. Open or new, I probably don't need any of this, but I do need my exit, right? See where I'm going? So how do I get rid of all this stuff very quickly? Well, you could probably go here and right click and delete, but the faster way is to go up here into your little smart arrow and go to edit items, okay? Now this is the one time where I'm going to allow you to accept the basic names for all your items. And there's a reason to this, right? They're actually organized pretty well. File, tool strip, menu item. There's a tool strip menu item, and it's the file tool strip menu item. It's almost named exactly like I like, except for it's the lowercase f instead of capital F. Who cares? Leave it alone, all right? Don't change this. The menu itself, we could change. The menu name itself for the app. If we want to reference the menu, we can do that. But the file tool strip menu item and the edit tool strip menu, all these things we don't care about. We definitely want to leave those alone. If I click on one of these, notice that it gives me the drop-down items collection on the right. I want to go there and click the ellipses, and there's other ways of doing this too. Notice that I have all of my menu items, and if I click on this, they actually give me properties, a little property or context-sensitive property menu on the right that talks about my menu items on the left, right? So I don't need all of this. All I need is my exit. Let me leave the tool strip separator. That's just a little line that separates stuff, so you kind of look nice. And maybe if I want to add something else into my tool strip, my menu item, I can, and I can move things around with these arrows. So for example, if I want my new to be underneath my open, I can do that. Although we want to follow convention, and it should be up here. If I want to delete them, what if I want to delete them all? Click up to this. Can I delete them all? Yes, I can. That's much faster than going right-click, delete, right-click, delete, right-click, delete, right? So I'll press OK. So we'll make our little menus. I want to go to my edit menu. Let's take a look at what it looks like. I'll go to collection, right? And again, do I need undo, redo, blah, 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 blah? Probably not, right? And I probably don't even need this menu at all. So for now, right, with all these decisions, let's just get rid of it. So my edit menu's gone. Notice how it readjusted my layout automatically up here, right? My tool strip menu item, my tools, like for options and stuff, let's go into that little collection. So again, if I click away and click back and I scroll, you can see that there's a little drop-down items collection. That's what I'm accessing here. By the way, you can modify the font. You can modify the way it's been presented, if it's checked or not. Like, there's all kinds of little things we can go into today. Notice it has a customize tool strip menu item, so it's going to say customize. I don't think I need that for now, so we don't need to customize my calculator. How about options? That might be one. Let's try and leave an options in there, and we'll create another page we go to from this page, right? So that way it kind of brings up our options menu, and maybe we can do something with the options, all right? So for now, we'll leave that in there because we're going to use it, right? Press OK. Okay. Help. I don't need a lot of the stuff in here. Again, I'm going to go into go into the area where I can hit my collections, right? So again, from help, here's my help tool strip menu item. Here's my collections. And I want to get rid of everything except for the about and the tool strip separator, right? So I want to get rid of all this because I don't care about searching. Get rid of it and press OK. Now we've got these three menus. And I'll press OK to that. And it looks like this, right? So that's pretty good. A little bit of a menu. That didn't take long to do, right? Yes. File? Font, yes, it should. So to answer your question, if I wanted to change but notice that if I want to type a new menu item here, like Tom, I could do that, right? I can type in the sub item in here as well, you know, Michael or Mike, you know, and I can make Tom and Mike my own little menu, if that doesn't make any sense. And if I right click, I can also delete that option right here on the menu bar, right? So I don't have to go into that whole thing I just did. If you want to do things right away, you can do things right here. You asked was if I go into this and I go into edit items, and let's say, for example, I want to change my font. Well, notice that my menu strip itself, the whole menu strip, has some settings. And if I scroll down, notice that there is layout, you know, generate member is true, and so on. And the grip margin, the location, all that kind of stuff, padding and size. This is neat because what you can do is you can change the height of your menu to make it exactly what you want, right? This is good. So where would font be? Right here. Here's my font. Now this is the font for your menu, right? So now, right now, it's the size is 9. Let's just change that and the type of font. And again, I can choose this, or I can go through the ellipses like I normally can on the right, which will pull up my little it'll be my little window, my dialog box. I'll be okay. And what I want to do is if I want to choose something else, like if I want to choose, I don't know, Verdana or something else. Here it is. I'm choosing Verdana. So I'm choosing regular. And let's say I'll make it 12. So a little bit bigger. Press OK. And now you can see my menu item. All my menus are different sized, right? Now we do that on the menu item itself, not on these individual items, right? For if you want the whole menu to look a certain way, and we do, right? Now, unless you want some special effect where the actual font grows when you highlight something or something weird like that, then you would have to do that in code, chances are. All right, but you notice we made our tool strip a little bigger, but I can't, also if I go back to my properties here on the right, we can see some of the same things we saw in that little menu, in the little helper when we click the smart button right here. So you can get all that here as well. You can see there's Verdana 12 for the actual menu itself. If I want to make it so that my size of the menu, right now it's 33, and that happened because of the size of my font size. If I want to make this a little bigger, so let's say I want to make it, I don't know, 38 or something like that. Does it work? How come it didn't work? How come this is all fixed up like this? That no matter what I do, it won't work. Sorry? So let's go there and see if there's an auto size function, right? So if we go size, right, and if I go up to the top, and you see that auto size is true, and if I turn auto size to false, now I have this little gadget that I can move to position it or make it as big as I want or as small as I want. You don't want to monkey with this too much, but sometimes for spacing and layout purposes, you may want to change that, turn auto size off to kind of adjust your menu or any other item that's in here so it doesn't auto size with the font. Right? You may want to, sometimes to shrink things around, change the size, and it's the viewable area of your control. But I also want you to think about this. The controls, all controls, what we see here, containers, right? Controls are containers. They can have, and a lot of times, sub-controls or other controls, child controls that are layered on top of them. All right, cool. So we have this file and exit, and I want to make this kind of act like this, right? So when I click my exit button, I want it to do this. Well, remember, we had some kind of code around this. And I'm going to go down to my code again. So I'm going to look at my calculator form, and I'm going to right-click and go View Code or press F7. And when I do that, you can see that I have my calculator form. I got a couple of operands. And as I go down here, there's form closing, right? So here's my form closing event. My form closing event, right? And what I want to do is when I click my exit button, right, I want to trigger my form closing event. That's what I want to do. I want to trigger it, right? And I want it to ask, do you want to stop? So let's see if we can do it the same way we did before. So here's my exit button. I'm going to go on the right and pick up my properties. And I'm going to hit the little lightning bolt. It's going to take me to the default. See this default right here? Click. When I click the exit, that's what I'm basically saying. I want to kind of go down here and choose calculate button, click. Notice that I can't, there is no closing event, right? What would that be? The form closing event isn't there. I don't have a choice of that. Anybody have an idea? There isn't a form like a form closing event because, unfortunately, form closing happens as a form event, right? It's not a click event. I'm not making it close by another button. I'm using the button that's on my form itself, the X, which is actually built into the form, so that's triggering the form to close, and that's why it's responding the way it is. So what I need to do is make another event that just application exits, right? That's what I wanted to do, right? But there's going to be some difficulties here because remember, this form has been spawned by the other form, right? Or there could be difficulties, is what I'm saying. So that's one thing. The other thing is we haven't really named this menu too well. So I want to kind of change that. So at the top of my, if I go back to properties for a second, at the top of my form here, I see menu strip 1. And what I want to do here with menu strip 1 is change this to calculator menu strip, right? That makes sense. Just the menu strip of my calculator. Calculator menu strip. And notice also that I get this funky little thing down here that's in the gutter. I got two parts. There's this part up here, and there's this part down here. And notice that when I highlight this, so is this highlighted. It's almost like it's a component that's not necessarily visual. There's a component to the menu that's behind the scenes that takes care of all the organization and the hierarchy. Okay, and that's what this thing means. Whenever you see something here, notice we also had that. If I was going to go back to my Solution Explorer, we also have that for my splash form. So if I look at my splash form. Here's my splash form, and down here you see that there's a little splash form timer, which is a non-visual component that we've added into the form by dragging and dropping this splash form timer down here. Okay, so we go to here, and there we go. We see this our little code, and here's our calculator form. Now what I want to do, now that my calculator is named properly, my calculator menu, I want to kind of go into here and double click. So we hit click on our exit button, and it's going to say exit tool strip menu item click, which is correct. That's the one we want, right? When we click this exit tool strip menu item, I want application to exit, just like it would normally do if we're hitting this form closing. Something's going to make this form closing happen, and I want it to, it's going to trigger anyway. Let's try this out. So application exit, right? Should work. Let's see how it goes. So if I do this, and if I run it properly, there we go. 1, 2, 3, it goes to my calculator, yay. And if I go file, exit, hey, how did that come up? I told you, it's a form event, so it's gonna come up anyway. And if I click OK, it's the form, yeah? But we have a problem. What is the problem? How come this worked out that we have a problem now and before we didn't when we closed our form, right? What do we do differently with the form closing event? Remember how this form was made. This form was made, it was spawned from the splash screen, right? That's what happened here. I spawned the splash screen. And what I did was I said application exit, which closed off our form and caused a memory leak, right? In our application structure, in our Windows, there would be a memory leak if I actually allowed this to happen, because somehow I'm trying to close an application from a child form, right? That causes the issue. And there's some invalid operation exception, which is going to happen, which is a system invalid operation exception occurred in this DLL, dynamic link library, because what I'm trying to do is execute something on a member, a child member, which leaves the the parent member unclosed, which is not good. And there's other, by the way, there's other issues. If you actually click on this one for general help, it actually gives you some suggestions on what this means. That's one thing to look at. You can also take a look at view details. An enumeration operation may not execute, right? System collections list dictionary internal, right? And what this means is it's trying to do something called automatic reference counting. It's counting all the things that are open, and you're shutting things down in a drastic way, such a drastic way that Windows doesn't like it. So how do we exit gracefully, right? Because this is neat. If we only had one form, we can use application exit, right? And we can still use application exit if we did some housekeeping, right? Which means somehow close off the other one. But I can't close it from here, because if I close off the other one from here, then I kind of close myself, right? So how do I do that? I got to somehow be able to shut everything down in order, right? Can I do my parent, my previous form dot close? Can I do that, right? Let's try this out. Remember I set up this situation where I created a reference area, right, that refers to my previous form. The splash form itself, so if I look at the splash form, and if I look at the code for the splash form, here's the code, I pressed F7, you can see that when I on tick, right, when this thing actually finishes its iteration, so it opens up, it does two things. I create a reference to a new form called calculator form. And then after that, I instantiate a new object of that form and store it inside that reference. Now this could have been said differently. I could have said, I am instantiating a new object of the next form called calculator form, right? But see how I said it? I said I create a reference, right? That's all this is. And it's an empty reference right now with the form of, I feel like, Wonder Twin Powers, I'm too old. Take the form of, but I'm not really making that item yet. I'm almost like putting aside some space. Memory space hasn't been allocated, but I'm saying, hey, reserve a little bit of space for now, for 1 second, okay? I'm going to use this in a second. I haven't used it yet, but put some space aside. That's what this is kind of saying. And then here what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, kind of instantiate a new object, an anonymous object of the form, and then point to it. That's what this equal sign says. Point this variable is going to point to that space that I've created, right? This object. All right, so now that I've got that object, which is called calculator form lowercase c, I'm going to access its previous form property. Well, actually, it's actually not a property. It's a member variable. That's public, which is bad form. We're going to fix this today, right? It should look different than this. And if I go back to my calculator form, which is in code, this part, right? Here's my member variable, right? I've created a public member variable of type form. Remember that all forms are derived from the form class, superclass, right? So what this does is says, now I'm going to ask you this question, all right? Inheritance, for those people who know OO, right? Object-oriented programming. Are child forms bigger, child objects bigger or larger than their parent objects? What would you think? Always larger, right? The parent is actually always smaller than the child in this object-oriented scenario, right? An example of this is when I make a person class. I make a person class, and then I derive professor from my person class. Remember we did this? And then the professor has more stuff in it than the person class. It has what the person class had plus a bunch of other customization. So whenever we think about a derived class or a subclass, different ways of saying the same thing, child class, we're always thinking about what customization have I done to the superclass? What have I added to the superclass to make this subclass more useful, right? That's what I've done. So here, notice that I'm using the superclass form, which is smaller than my previous form. But the good thing about inheritance, we have a relationship, right? So previous form is still a form. It's just a specialized form of the original one, right? It's a more customized form that's larger, right? It doesn't quite fit inside form, but it is a form. So therefore, I can refer to it as a form. And then I don't have to specify what type of form it is. If I really wanted to, I could make it so that this says calculator, splash form. That would work too, if I really want to be specific. But the only reason why I'd want to do this, right, is if I wanted previous form, this variable, to have code hinting to access stuff that's specific for the splash form that no other form has, which I don't. All I care about is the closing and hiding, right? That's all I care about, which all forms have, right? So therefore, I don't need to use a specific form, splash form, All I need to use is the form superclass, which is perfectly fine. And if this confuses you, we need to go back and review your OO, because this is something as part of object-oriented design methodology. Okay, so I'm using the form instead of I could use the splash form. It's not bad. If you in an exam you use splash form instead of form, you forgot that, I wouldn't cry, right? It would be also correct. It's just that you don't need to. That's what I'm showing you here. All right, so now that I have a reference to my previous form, then down here, like I said earlier, I shouldn't do this, right? I should definitely close off my other form. Can I do this? Let's see. If I go this dot previous form dot close, right? There we go. I'm closing off that previous form. Okay, and I'm saving, right? Kind of the same thing as application exit. What happens to my form, right? I want to basically hide it, right? So I probably want to do something. I want to hide this form and then close the other one. So this dot hide, this hides, and then I want to close the other one. That's what I want to do. But it's going to stop me, yeah? It's going to stop me from doing that because of this little thing. So for now, before we hide, right, let's just go here and press // for a little comment, and we'll see what this does. Do I need it? And if I press play, let's see what happens. So 1, 2, 3, it goes to my other form. Yay. And now I want to press file exit. And when I do that, she's gone. And I didn't get any kind of notification that, hey, I'm closing stuff down. What's going on? And it's exited the application, if you see, right? That's not what I want. I want them to tell me the same thing that I did with the X, which is you're closing. Something's happening. How come it didn't do that? How come my form, this form here, didn't close, right? I didn't tell it to close. That's why. But I can't close my form. And I can't close my form to go to my exit, to actually do the application itself, exit itself, the closing. Because if I close down my form, there's no control. I can't affect any other form or anything else when my form is closed. My form closing, what it does is it ceases me, it stops me from having any kind of control. My code won't work after that. So I need to kind of close it after I close or kind of do my form close first before I close this one. But then if I do, I won't be able to execute this, chances are. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So if I just do this, like I said, this dot hide, that's not going to solve it, right? Because this hide, I can hide or just make it invisible, right? But this close will close off my previous form and kill my application. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about these things because these are the idiosyncrasies, right? About how to use this stuff, right? So file exit, gone, right? It closes off my application. Now if I do this, if I go close, this is different. What close will do, right? And this is neat. It's going to ask me the question, right? It's going to say, hey, are you sure you want to close off your form? Because it's going to trigger this form closing, right? But after I decide whatever I decide to do, it's going to still close off everything, right? Look at the logic here. This is incorrect. This is incorrect. What's happening, right? I don't want this to happen. So let's try this out and see how I can fix this. 1, 2, 3. Open up my calculator form, and then when I come here and press exit, it should ask me, "Hey, are you sure?" Now, if I press cancel, I'm not sure. Guess what's going to happen? It's going to close anyway, right? Because it doesn't matter what I say. It's going to skip by this line, right? After it goes down, it's going to go to line 100, and it's going to close anyway, right? So that's going to stop me from doing this, what I want, right? So how do I prevent that from happening? I could put this logic into place, the same logic here. I could do that, where I can check. Hey, if you're closing the form, unless I get a cancel results, close it off and kill my application, right? But if I do that here and here, it's kind of like I'm duplicating code. So what should I do? This one? Would that close my application? What, this? Or this? This one? Okay, and you're saying that'll do it? That'll close my application down? Are you sure? Yeah. Okay, let's see. Let's talk about why I would do that. Ta-da! Yay! We're closing my form off. And I press File, Exit. And I say, yes, I'm sure, I'm positive. Close me. And it closed me off. How come? Right? accessing the method, and when I go to my close method, what is it saying? It's saying if my result dialog's okay, previous form close, which is doing this method anyway. So I've already got it in place. I've already got my code here. I'm just utilizing what I had. Now, if I didn't have this, I'd have to think about another way. Maybe I'd have to have another method outside of my form that can handle both closings. But for now, all I need to do is this dot close, and that'll handle all the stuff for me. Clear? Probably clear as mud, I'm guessing, for some of you. All right, which means not clear at all. We're going to move on. So now that's one thing. So I've actually made my exit button work. My calculator button, I want a new page. I want an about page, but I don't want to calculate stuff. I want an about page to be automatically generated for me, right? I could make my own form, absolutely. But why work so hard? Welcome. Why work so hard when I can, get it all for free? Remember, this is about rapid application development. I want to make my about form. How do I do so? Well, first of all, what I need to do in my Solution Explorer, here's my Solution Explorer. I want to add another form. And the way I can do this is right-click on my project. I'm going to go to Add, New Item. And when it brings up the New Item dialog box, I want to search for About Box, right? It's already there. So I'm going to go About. If I search for About, you can see that there's going to be an About box that comes up, right? And this About box, I don't want to leave the About box there. I just want to call it About Form. You can change whatever. It's like a little form anyway, right? Here's my About form. Press Add. And here's my little About form, right? Okay, so what is this thing? I'm going to talk about what this thing does for a second. It has some defaults, and you certainly can change this. It also has a layout, which is using a table layout, so you can add information in here, and you will. In one of your assignments, I have asked you to, create more details in your About box. But for now, it has a built-in button. It's almost like our own customized form to do stuff, right? Now, there's different ways of opening and closing forms up, right? This form, when we use About form, I want us to do two things. One, it has to be instantiated. So we have to instantiate the form, or else it's not going to show up, just like the other one we did, right? This is kind of like opening first I've opened a splash form, we instantiate my calculator form, then I instantiate my About form, which is coming from my calculator form. It's all like a cascade, a domino effect, a hierarchy, if you will, from one to the other, right? So here I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create my About form, but instead of me doing a show, I'm going to do a show dialog. And the show dialog is different, right? In that it'll be a modal form, which will not allow me to click away, right? As opposed to a modeless form. A modeless form, like we talked about, maybe I talked about that earlier already. It means that I can keep it up and then do something else, right? Modeless. Modal means, and I'll spell it for you so you know the spelling, what I'm talking about here. It's the difference between a modal form, like I said, right, which is, it has a mode, right? And the mode for the modal form is you have to change something. So if I go modal form, right? A modal form and modeless Windows forms. Those are the two states, modal and modeless, right? When I use show dialog, it's modal. When I use show, it's modeless. Yes. To get this thing going, my splash form or my About form, I'm going to go right click on my project, right? And I'm going to go Add, and I'm going to go to New Item, which is going to bring up the New Item dialog. And up here on the right, I'm going to search for About. And if you should have what I have, you'll have the About box. Yeah? Okay. So now that I've got the About box, I want to use this About form. When I click my About under Help, the Help menu, I want the About form to come up. And let's see what it brings us, okay? So first of all, I need some kind of event handler for that to happen. So I'm going to go back to my calculator form on the design side, double-click About, which is going to bring up this little stub. Again, people lost marks for the first assignment for leaving all these things here. Please don't leave empty stubs like this event handler, just sitting there. Get rid of it. We talked about how to get rid of it, right? You need to go into there's two ways. You can go into your designer and erase the reference and then get rid of it safely, or you can go into your form itself, calculator form, and I clicked on the actual About. And you can see that in my properties, if I bring up properties, I have this little arrow. I can just erase this. If I erase it just by highlighting and pressing delete, it'll kill the reference, and then I can go back and delete the stub. Don't do it by yourself because you'll scream and you'll, oh my God, my design broke. Of course it didn't break. That was like from day one. All right, so now we've actually got our little form, which is inside of our page, right? So here's our calculator form. Inside our calculator form, we have this little about tool strip menu item event handler. That's what this is. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say something like this. I'm going to say I want to instantiate the about form. Now my about form, I've named correctly, right? It's called about form in my Solution Explorer. This is a good thing, right? I've named it correctly from the get-go. I'm not going to talk about other properties for now, okay? So if I go back here, I could do something like this. About form, right? We'll say about form, lowercase, is equal to new about form, right? That's the first thing we need to do. We have to instantiate, create a new form, right? So step one, create a new form, right? We need to do that. If we don't do that, there's no about form to show, right? The about form doesn't exist. When I create a form in memory here, when I'm designing a form, it's just the design. It's just like a blueprint for the form, right? The form doesn't get created unless I instantiate. And this is instantiate right here. When I use the new keyword and I use constructor notation like this with the open bracket, close bracket, I'm instantiating. I'm calling the constructor of the class, this about form class. I'm calling it, and it's breathing life into my my object, right? The blueprint that I'm using, which is the about form blueprint, which we call class. I'm breathing life into it and creating an about form, lowercase a, object, right? Now that I got that, second step, when I want to show my about form, so step 2. So, you know, show the about form, you know, with show dialog, right? Which is modal method, display the form. There's a couple of other ones that you might see. For example, my font dialog. In fact, most dialogs should be modal, right? File, save, print. Those things you shouldn't be able to get away from. You shouldn't be able to just like toss your print or file, whatever, on the side, keep working. Typically what the normal convention says is as soon as you bring up a dialog box, you freeze your entire application until you're done with the dialog box. And that's what modal versus modeless is. Modal, you freeze everything. Modeless, you can keep going, right? So here I'm going to say something like this. About form. Now we can't use show. If we did show, it would be a modeless. We want to do show dialog, which is the other option, right? Right? About form show dialog. Also, notice if I hover over show dialog, it actually returns a dialog result. Remember we did this before? Just like we did a dialog result for our message box. That's another example of a modal form, right? Here, if I hover over it, it tells me I'm getting a dialog result. But there's only one result for this form, okay. There's no other button, right? It's either okay or nothing, right? In fact, if you click X, it's still okay, right, on the form itself. Let's see how this works. So I'm going to kind of run this thing. And then I'll put it up to GitHub because I added a new form. I added something new. I run this thing, and if I press help about, hey, there's my little about form. And it tells me my name. There's the name of my application, my version, my copyright, and anything else you want in here, right? Okay, where do I set all that up? Where did that come from? How the hell did they give me all this stuff, right? Well, it's actually a system form, right? So let me escape from here. Press OK. Yes, I'm sure, right? So this is where, this is how I do it, but the form is a special form. It's, remember, I picked it from a new item. It wasn't just like this random form that I made on my own. And if I actually inspect this thing, so here's my form. And if I press, I want to see my about form. So if I go back to Solution Explorer, I'll do it this way. Here's my about form. And if I press F7, right, to see what it looks like this. It actually does a couple things here. It actually sets up my string format about, and notice that there is a placeholder. This is what this is. This is a placeholder for my assembly title. Where the hell did I get my assembly title from, right? And I got my assembly product, and I got assembly version, and I use string interpolation to sub in wherever the curly braces are with the 0. This is the first thing. I take my string itself, and I sub in this assembly version in here. That's another way of writing, hey, my text is equal to version plus my assembly version, right? Which is concatenation. That's different than interpolation. Concatenation means when I take a value and a string, and I use the plus operator, and I put them together, and the result is a string. That's concatenation. Interpolation is where I take a string, and I inject data through a placeholder like this. That's interpolation, okay? Two different operations. All right, so once we've done this, notice that these are all information. I'm getting information from somebody, from somewhere. Where am I getting them from? Well, notice that there's a couple things that I'm loading in here. One, system Windows forms. The other thing is system reflection. I'm using those two. That's what the ones that are highlighted along with system, right? And down in here, if you notice, it's collapsed. But if I look at it, here's the assembly attribute accessors, right? Where I kind of say assembly title is a string that I can use up here. This is actually a method, right, that I can use. And it's actually an accessor method. There's the getter, right? And I also have my assembly version. Here's the getter. Notice that there's no setter, right? That means all these operations, I can't write to my assembly. I can only get from it, which means that they're read-only. All of these properties, that's what these things are. Assembly title, assembly version, assembly description, all this stuff. These are all properties, public properties that can be accessed outside of my application once I declare them, right? And also notice that up here, I can say something like this, assembly.getExecutable And if I hover over assembly, you can see where it comes from. It comes from system.reflection. That's the library that I have to access my assembly information. Cool, cool. But where's my assembly information stored in the first place? I need to know that. Well, I'm sure you're not going to be surprised to note that it's under project properties down here. And over here, you can see that there's my application information, the name of my assembly name. Here's my default namespace. And I have a bunch of other things I want in here. If I click on other options like build, you can see that there's other options in here. There's build events. There's a bunch of things here in terms of settings, right? Signing, security, my publish, my code analysis. All this stuff is part of my project. Notice that there's my published version, 1000. I can change this to 0001 if I want. Let's go back to application for a second. So there's my output type is a Windows application or a console. I can make whatever I want. What's my current target framework? 4.6.1, right? That's important. And what else do I have that I can monkey around with? If I go to my about form, and if I look at this part here, which is my description, and if I want to access what this is, it says description. Well, if I want to look at the properties for my description, right? Right, here are my properties in my description. And if I want to look at my text properties, right, here's my text properties. This says description. So somehow it's being overwritten and nothing is there. So something in the code is making it happen. So here, if I go back to my about form, and if I look up here, notice, is there anything written here about description? Here's my assembly description, right? Which would be in my text box description, or my description text box is what this should really say. Right, or some kind of thing like that. And here's my assembly description, which is just another property. So I can look down to see where that is. Here it is, which is saying something like this: assembly.getExecutingAssembly.getCustomAttributes. And then assembly description attribute is right here. This is where it's coming from, which is a system reflection. And this is what I look at, the assembly description attribute. So when I look at my application, I want to look at my assembly description. And that's where all that is being stored. Here's my assembly information, and here's my description. Okay, so this is all controllable by you. You can put whatever you want in there. And a lot of times I get you guys to put some stuff in here to say, put your name in here, you know, that kind of thing. Here's my company, here's my product, right? And you can also, even though this is a specific form the system generated, it doesn't mean you can't modify the form and customize it. Of course you can, right? The form itself, if I go back to the form, here's my assembly form. Sorry, my about form one day when it comes up. Come on, form, come up, virtual machine. There it is. Notice that this is all inside of this box here. And if I go to table layout panel and I go to edit rows and columns, It's exactly what we've talked about before, right? So it's not like you couldn't add additional columns and rows, right, to put things in there, like, for example, student ID, right? You can put that in there, or name, author, whatever you want to put in here, you can put in. And a lot of times we put that stuff in here. Sometimes we put it inside description. I'm not going to tax you to do certain things. This is a form, you can be creative. The other thing you can also do is get rid of this ugly picture. If you don't like this picture box, you can get rid of it and you can make your own, something that makes sense for your application. A lot of times, like, for example, logo type of application it is, you can sub that in. This isn't something that's been generated. It's just a picture box. If I go here, notice that it says choose image, right? And the image it's choosing is my default image from a local resource, right? And here's the image itself. I can choose another image if I want. Like, if I want to put my calculator logo in there, it wouldn't work because it's kind of this way instead of this way. But if I really wanted to, and if I chose to do it, there's my calculator button. Then I could change from what this looks like right here, from stretch image, right? I could choose to zoom, right? There it is, my calculator. Doesn't look right. Should be completely centered differently. But I could fill this image up or change the way this whole form is laid out, as long as I leave these basic text boxes in place. I can move the text boxes wherever I want on the form and reorganize my form to make it customized the way I want, right? Yes. Okay, so I go to project. Underneath project, I'm going to go to properties, right? And under properties is going to take you to application. And on the right, it's going to say assembly information. And if I want to, I can, in my description, I can say author me, right? I can change my assembly version, my file version, whatever else I want. Don't touch the GUID. This is the ID for your application that makes it different from any other application. Leave it alone. It's system generated. Press OK. And when you come back up to the run the application now, it should say, when I run this thing, if I go help about, you can see it's going to say calculator and author is me, right? You can put as much in there as you want. Not that exciting, but it handles one of the things you're going to need, not for this assignment, but for next assignment, right? So just letting you know, I'm kind of prepping you up for the stuff that you need, so that way you're not missing anything. Okay, so you got your menus. Anyone not understand menus? Menus are just like buttons. You set them up with the menu tool strip, and then once you click on them, you double click on them like any button to create the event, right? And once that you double click on it, you make that event happen. Example, I want to make an options form, all right? Step me through the process. How do I make an options form? Help me out. What do? I want to make another form? Yeah, I'm looking at you. I'm making a form. How do I make it? Because I can look over there at that table or the tables that I've always that give me answers all the time, and that's not fair. So I'm giving you, a chance to answer here. This is your chance to shine. What's your name? I'm going to put you up on YouTube. You're going to be immortalized. Tell me. What's your name? Minnie? Good name. Okay, Minnie. Tell me give me the answer here. How do I make a new form? Yeah, I want to make a new options form. What do I do? What's the first thing that you would do for my options form? If you're my developer and I said, Minnie, you're going to be making a new options form, what do I do first? Don't look at her. You can handle it. Come on, take a guess. I know I'm putting you under the gun. I'm putting you under the microscope for a second, but just ignore it. Okay? I'm your friend. I'm not trying to kill you, right? Not yet.
You create a new form first?
Yes, you create a new form first. Bing, bing, bing. You got some points. There we go. So let's try. I can't give you bonus points, but let's just try this out. So let's do this. So right click. I'm going to make a new form. That's exactly right. Right. So I'm going to make a new item. I can also choose from. Notice that I have in my quick hits here, Windows form, because I've done it so many times. Click that. I'm going to click window form, and I'm going to call this what? What should I name it? Options form, right? Something like that makes sense. There we go. Here's my options form. Now what? My options form looks pretty ugly, right? But for now, I just want to get to it. Okay, I want to get to my options form. I want to make this my own custom modal form for options, right? So when I go in there, it's a modal form that I'm going to be able to use. I'm going to show dialogue. I'm not going to show for this one. And I want to do, how do I make a modal form happen? Let's go back to the code. It's got to start with the code, right? It's going to start from where? My calculator form, right? All right, so here's my designer. What do I do to make this, to make, you know, the connection between one form and the other? The first thing I do. Okay, I double click on my above form is what I'm thinking you're saying.
No.
You sure?
The option, tools and option.
What?
You click tools first.
Okay. Under tools. Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, are you sure?
The tool menu.
This, oh, the tool menu. This one. Okay, now? And then?
Option selected.
Options, yeah. And then?
And then you choose the event.
I could. That's one way of doing it. Or I could double click, right? I could double click in this case to make my own event, right? Here's my options tool strip menu item, right? Which makes sense. And now what do? I have a form already, right? So what's the first step?
You create
There you go. It's up there, right? It's right in front of you. It's create new form, right? So let's do it, right? And see, I'm helping you out here. You're not alone. If don't worry, I'm not. If I make a fool of you, I make a fool of myself, right? So it's all awesome, right? All right. So number one is step one. Do the same thing. We create a new form. It's almost like copy paste, right? And the form is going to be the options form, right? Options form. How do I do that? It's got to be named options form, right? And we're going to call it lowercase options form, or you can call it my options form or with this options form, whatever you want. And then we're going to make it with a new keyword. We're going to say options form, right? Okay, good. So now I've got my form. Next step. Are you sure the next one's okay? Can I just copy paste? Can I just do one of these? Copy paste from here and then change the name from above form to options form. Is that possible? Is that enough? Let's do it. Copy, paste, right? Instead of above form, we'll put options form. With the show dialog, we'll change this from above form to lowercase options form, right? And looks like I'm okay. Will this work? You don't know, you guess. I want you to know, you have no idea about user intuition with this rapid application development. Do you think it's going to work? It should. Let's see what happens, right? That's how easy it is to make a modal form versus modeless form, right? 1, 2, 3, counting fast. And then I'm going to go to tools and I'm going to click options. And can I do anything over here? No, because this is modal, right? Modal forms are not allowed things. If I click this, can I go back? Yes, now I can do what I want to do here, right? So that worked. Now there's a couple things I need to do to set up my modal form a little better to make it customized, right? A couple things I want to do with my modal form before we stop for break. And if I go to my options form here, thank you, Minnie, for all that wonderful help of yours, right? I probably want to get rid of this X from now. I want to kind of test it out. So I want to make my own buttons, right? I don't have to get rid of it. I can leave it in place as well. Well, my practice is usually when I make my own custom modal form, I get rid of it. And I have my own buttons. Okay, cancel, whatever I want, right? So I'll do that. Let's just try this out. So first of all, and I'm also going to set it up so my start position is my Windows center screen, right? Center screen position. I'm also going to do all the things I normally do with my form. So I'm going to change my auto selection mode from, or auto scale mode from font to none. Definitely don't want to do that. I want to keep it the same size as my other form. Notice my calculator form from a design perspective looks pretty big from a calculator wise. If I click on one of the buttons to give me an idea, I want to kind of scale it so it looks somewhat similar to in style and font as the other ones. So I use Verdana and Microsoft Sans Serif. One of the two is okay. I mean, this is a little different, but it kind of looks like a sans serif font, which doesn't clash so much, right? It's a different style. We're also going to talk about what these little underlines are in a bit. So what is this? So I can use either one, and I'm probably going to use Microsoft Sans Serif at around 20 points. That's what my recommendation is, because we're going to try and match the style, right, as much as possible in my font. Or I can, if it's a dialogue, and if I think dialogue boxes should all be Verdana at whatever font size I chose over here, right? Like notice I made this a different font style. So here's my font, Verdana at 12 point. That's what I decided to make it. Then that's what my form should be. But it should be one of the two styles that we want to make from a UI, UX perspective. All right, so we're going to choose my options form. And I'm going to choose the Microsoft default font. But I'm going to choose it at 20. All right, so it's going to be really big. There we go. And we've got that part done. I want to get rid of my control box. By the way, what Minnie just had, what happened to her? One of you, it's your turn next. It's coming. I'm going to choose somebody at random, right? Because I want you guys to, not hide so much, right? All right, so here's my true. It's going to go to false. So I don't have an about box or any kind of control box anymore, right? So I've changed from true to false. Now notice it's still there. And the reason for that is because of my form border style. So there's my form border style. Remember, I changed it. I want to change it away from sizable to none or to fixed single. That might be all right as well. And I need at least two buttons here, right? The OK button and the cancel button, or accept or cancel might be the better buttons because I'm changing some options, right? Whatever those options are, color, font, whatever, right? And I want to change that, so I'm going to have an accept and cancel. Two buttons. Let's bring them into play. So here's my button. I'm drag and drop that, and it doesn't quite fit, so we're going to have to make it a little bigger. And we're going to rename it because this doesn't make any sense. We'll make this the, hey, by the way, best practices. What should it be? Should my accept button be closer, or should my cancel button be closer from a UI UX perspective? What do you think? Closer to the left side. Should it be on the left side or the right side? Or does it matter? Huh? Should be on the left side. Why? That's a good answer. I like your answer, right? And the way to check that is if I go to run this application, now who cares what it says for a second, right? I'll come back to that to fix that. So I come here, and if I pull up my little cancel, notice that OK is here and cancel's over here, right? Are you sure? And a lot of times what we want to try and do is do the same methodology, right? It's weird if we put cancel over here and OK over there, right? Just FYI, right? So you want to kind of put the positive on the left, most cases, and negative on the right. It's almost like farther away from my mouse from the left to right. Now, if you're a right to left country, different way. If you're in another country that has maybe a different layout, then it wouldn't be the case. What we're talking about here, most times, this is a standard message box here in Microsoft. OK, cancel, right? Like this. Yes, no, right? Yes is the affirmative, and no is the negative. So we're good to go. So cancel. OK. And close it, and the same thing goes here. So this is the accept button. Accept button. And now we'll call it accept. We'll make it say accept down here. And let's see, make sure it fits. Make sure that the font, the button is nicely sized. And now, was there a faster way to create the next button? Is there a way of kind of, control clicking or option dragging or alt dragging or something? If I do that, it doesn't do anything. How about control drag? Is that something that does? Am I allowed to do that? Yeah. Can I do that? Is there a way of doing that? Huh? Control V, Control V is proper, but in some applications, and I'm looking at Adobe Photoshop and those kinds of, if you control drag or option drag, alt drag, it actually creates the other button as well. So if I do that alt drag thing, so here's alt drag, doesn't do anything, right? If I do control drag, it does this really weird menu, right? If I do any other kind of dragging, that doesn't work. But if I do copy paste, it does create the other button, and I can bring it into place. Now this is really a small form, right? So let's make this a little bit larger, right? Make it a little larger so we have, accept and cancel, because we're going to put other stuff on top of here to make it more interesting, right? Can't have an accept and accept, right? So this one's going to have to be the cancel button. Right? There's a cancel button. And this is going to say cancel. Here's a question for you. Does it matter which button I press, whether it's accept or cancel, to go back to my previous form? All I care about is that, well, for now, all I care about is either one hides the form or it closes this one off. It's got to close the form, yeah? It's going to go back to the other form. Transfer, I got to transfer control from this modal form. I got to transfer it back to the calling form, whatever the call is, wherever it's coming from. So I'm going to kind of kill it completely. Either one, cancel or accept. Now, what happens with the form, cancel or accept, that's a different thing. What the effects of the buttons are. But either way, I'm going back to the other form, right? Whether I make a change or I don't. Okay? One thing is with forms, just to note, and if I kind of scroll up to the top here, notice that I have an accept button. Here's my accept button. And if I kind of scroll down, I have a cancel button. And I'm going to set those buttons up as accept and cancel. Why? Because remember what I talked about in design, on the design side, right? So this is the option form, right? But on the design side, when I call it, remember this form has been called, right, by the other form, right, which is my calculator form. I just can't see it here because I've got too many things here. But if I go to my calculator form, notice that right here, it's a show dialog, and it returns a dialog result. It's going to return accept, cancel, right? So depending on what's returned, what values are returned, right? If it's an accept or cancel, I can respond. I can say, okay, they accepted whatever changes I wanted, effect the change. Or they canceled the changes that I wanted, don't do anything, okay? So that's what this does. That's why I have it as a show dialog, okay? Let me go back to my options design, right? So here's my option form. Okay, here is where we're going to do some stuff after the break. I want to put two containers, right? Two containers, and if I look at some containers, I have a group box. That's a good one to do. I want to put a group box in here. Here's one group box. And I want to use this group box, which is going to be a set of controls. We're going to make it so that they're check boxes, right? And I can choose something that I want to do, right? So what would be good from an options perspective to set as a checkbox, on or off? Something I want to turn on or off, right, for a checkbox. Is there something that makes sense that you can think of as an option? Yes.
It would take a lot of work, but if you're doing like two operations in more than two.
Good. Something that's going to an options for this thing. How about turning on operations? Yeah. Font control for checkbox, I guess. Well, that means I turn it on and off. Checkbox, not other kind of things. A checkbox, yeah. I could. That's the answer. So I could make a kind of I won't do it here, but let's say I wanted to affect the layout, right? So for example, my checkbox, this group box could be layout, right? So we won't do this because it's going to take too long today, but it would be my layout, group box. Notice that I'm kind of naming this thing, right? And then I probably name this thing as layout because it makes sense, right? Here's my layout. And my layout, I can put it this way, or maybe I can put it this way, whatever I want. And then I want to probably put a couple of checkboxes. So depending on which one I choose, and again, these are just common controls here. And if I drag and drop a checkbox in place, so what are the layouts? That's one layout. So this will be my, default layout, So default layout checkbox, if I really want to go there, right? So default layout checkbox, why not, right? Which we'll call default, right? But this is kind of, should it be a checkbox or should it be a radio button? What do you think is better? Because it's going to switch from one to the other. That's an on-off. That's a radio button, right? So that's a nice idea, but layout, not the right idea for checkbox. What else? Yes? Retain history. So I want to turn on the ability for me to remember things. That might be a good idea. What else?
Display certain things like logo and turn off the logo.
Turn off the logo. Okay, I like those things. How about this? Add other functions individually. Like I want to show a square root, right? As a
Other buttons or logo.
right, hide or show. My buttons. Guys, it's hard to talk over you. Things carry very nicely, gentlemen. I can hear you very clearly. Yeah, I'm talking about you guys. I can hear all you guys, yeah? So please don't compete with me. It's hard. I have to just raise my voice and keep raising my voice. And on the video, it seems like I'm yelling, right? Because I don't want to yell. So checkbox, this doesn't make any sense for layout, but maybe function. I want to add functions. That might be the better way. So then I'd have to rename this thing, right? So instead of my layout group box, maybe I want to kind of put some kind of function. I can spell it properly. Function group box. And then we'll call this stuff, kind of functions that I want. you have to make sure that it kind of something that you can turn on or off. So maybe I want to have a couple functions. Maybe I want square root. So that would be something I want to kind of enable. So this, instead of my default layout checkbox, I'll call this the square root checkbox.
Then you have to give space out in the letter form.
Right, and we're not going to do that today, right? But you're right. We'd have to do all that stuff. We'd have to give space in the calculator. So I would change this to square root. And maybe you want to even put a little symbol in there, you know, if you want to go crazy. So square root, right? And maybe other functions. These are really big, by the way. Like, it's massive. Like, probably would make this a lot smaller. And could I make these even though my functions is really big and these buttons are big, could I make everything in this group box smaller? And the answer is yes. I can kind of click in here, and if I want to make this so that it is much smaller, so let's say 14. Press OK. Now everything becomes smaller, so it makes more sense. Even though the grand scheme of things, it's you know, I make these bigger boxes for these old eyes of mine. You can make these smaller. So copy paste. Right here's my square root, and you can put another function in here like exponent. So a couple of other things. So exponent box. Here's another reason why I want to do this. If I just put exponent, I don't know sometimes if it clashes with a keyword. So putting checkbox at the end, make sure that it's an original variable, right? Exponent. So these ones allow me to check on or off different functions that are not, you know, kind of on by default, right? And that's this thing. I'm not going to go into too much more detail about this, right? So I can put a little function checkbox function thing here. I'm going to copy and paste this whole thing, which I can do too. I can go, whoop, here's another one. And instead of making these checkboxes, oops. Instead of making these checkboxes, I can delete them. And now we can call this the layout group box, right? As an example. And I can drag and drop, instead of functions we can call layout like we did before. But instead of these checkboxes, we can have radio buttons. So here's radio button. So I'll put one in there. Here's my radio button 1. Notice it takes on the form of the last thing that was inside there, the parent container, right? So this one would be called radio button 1. This would be called whatever it is. So standard, right? That's the layout. And this is my standard radio button. Standard radio button. Don't be shy with the names. Some people like want to make this small, like STND or something like that. And I'm going to copy paste for this one, put it over here. Notice that it's all aligned nicely. And we'll change this to the scientific radio button, scientific, if we add such a thing, which we don't. We won't with this little example. Right? And we're going to go down here and call this scientific, just so it looks like that. Good. Now we also want to set one of these to on, right? By default, I want to put standard as a default. And with radio buttons, you can, or even checkboxes, you can select whether they are checked, right? So notice that the checked value right now is false for the standard. You can only have one radio button inside of a group that's checked, right? That's the default behavior. So I'm going to put this on as true. Okay. Square root, exponent, standard, scientific, makes sense. And what I want to do is when one of these is selected, and we're going to do this when we come back from break, I want to pass it when I click the accept button. I want to pass this back to the originating form. Where I want to pass whatever values or things that I have here back to the originating form. How do I do that, right? How do I pass values? And that requires some other little information, because we're going to talk about that. Because remember, this dialog box lives and dies at the whim of the user. Once I click accept or cancel, it's gone. Dialog box, it's not hidden anymore. It's gone. Right? Let's take a short break. And while we're on break, I'll put this up on GitHub for you. If you missed something, you can go from there. And we'll take 10 minutes. When we come back, we'll continue and finish off this little example.